name is Leanna Rupert, and I am currently working as a community manager for the Fallout TV show. Cool fans.
Unite. Anyways, today is going to be a little bit of a spicier topic. It will be back in gaming, I promise. It is. We're back in the gaming. We're back. We're back, boys.
We're back. Yeah!
We're back in the gaming conversation. Thank you for my little pivot to watcher. That was a really fascinating conversation to have, especially just as a fan and not as an industry expert per se. I'm trying to get my fidgeting out at the beginning of this video so I can actually sit still for once. But today we are talking about Embracer. I see Embracer leadership is on the PR trip around media, and hats off to media that's covering it as objectively as they can. I know there's a lot of anger and vitriol towards leadership, not the whole company, obviously, but leadership, and that is not something that was made better by their tone-deaf pictures of leadership hanging out on an island saying, we're going to process the grief, when they themselves were in charge of 1,400 layoffs in gaming industry alone in the last year. So with that PR headspace,
Please! Jesus Christ.
I wanted to talk about just a brief rundown and why we really cannot let this just be forgotten, because it's not just about Embracer. It was the domino effect that Embracer's actions did cause. So this isn't going to dive super deep into the timeline. I'm going to give a brief overview.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Not getting super deep, but I will link some articles below. If I forget, because I forgot last time, please just remind me and I'll drop those in. But this is something that needs to be talked about because Embracer leadership is humbling himself, but he is not understanding the absolute catastrophic impact he had on the industry. And that impact will not be fully realized for years to come. What's the recent news? Why is Embracer back in the conversation? They recently split into 3 different companies, and they are using the friendship tactic to soften. So Embracer really said, ooh, friendship.
We made it!
But that's okay. I'm going to be professional. Okay, that was it. That was the last. The petty is leaving my body. You can see it. Not skilled enough with Photoshop yet, but maybe eventually. But pretend there's a really cool animation happening there. So they recently split, independently, publicly listed with Nasdaq Stockholm, with the exception of one, who is going to basically stay as publicly listed or as listed as it is currently under Embracer. So there's Asmodee Group, which is expected to split off within the next 12 months as of April 2024. Then you have the Coffee Stain and Friends, which is aiming for a 2025 official separation. And then, of course, you have Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends, which is going to remain under the Embracer umbrella. So that's kind of the gist of that. Asmodee is mostly going to be focusing on tabletop. This is something that Embracer said that was part of the decision, is they try to take on too much too fast. One, duh, but two, you have many warning signs that that's the direction it's going before you have to shut down studios, but we'll get to that point. So Asmodee is basically tabletop. Coffee Stain is basically going to have a little bit more freedom than all 3, because that's going to be focusing on multi-platform, including mobile, as well as a range of indie games and AAA games. I need to stop hunching. Bitch, stop hunching. And mobile games.
Come on, use your words, buddy.
Then Middle-earth is mostly going to be staying focused on AA, and it is going to be really focused on like heavy hitters. Tomb Raider. Is it too soon to talk about Lord of the Rings? I don't know, but Lord of the Rings is also included in that group as well. But they are not going to be focusing on mobile. That's just going to be PC and consoles unless something drastically changes. The CEO has recently, like I said, kind of been going on the PR junket, which is to be expected. You cannot make a catastrophically stupid decision like a failed $2 billion merger without doing some kind of a PR reputation tour. So it's expected. It's not because of just him. Many CEOs have had to do this. At least we didn't get an apology video. Bright side. Anyway, CEO Lars Wingfords recently spoke with GameIndustry.biz, very reputable site. I highly suggest you support that site. They have amazing writers and a very thorough and in-depth editorial process that keeps the information legit and very informative. And I think that is a really good resource that people sleep on, and you should not be sleeping on them. So he basically, not the sole person in charge of the bad decisions, but as your pay increases with your roles, as somebody who has been in C-suite before, you're not getting paid the bigger money because you're too smart.
You're right.
You're getting paid the big money because now you're in a more precarious situation and position that is physically, mentally, spiritually, everything draining, because it is so much. Because now you're not just a leader in the space, you are now taking on the role as protector of everyone that works underneath you that has to blindly trust that you know how to navigate the ship you've commandeered, instead of crashing it into endless nothing. Because people below you don't have the visibility, so they don't know exactly what's going on, and to sound the alarm.
The beacons are lit! Gun knuckles for 8!
You're getting paid money to be a protector. So when you're a studio that does layoffs, and this is why I've been especially hard on Bungie, because Bungie is one of those companies that did say they weren't necessarily needed, is there's so much trust, and you know, people think that I was hard on Bungie because of my personal layoff. You haven't been following me for a long time then. I have been very vocal about layoff accountability for years. This started when I was media and I was getting really burnt out on covering just very horrific stories and digging in and listening to a lot of stories that never made print because of safety reasons, but just getting that knowledge constantly, it hurts your heart if you're an empathetic or compassionate person. And I have left many jobs in my past that were very toxic, and I've never spoken out against any of them. So the fact that I'm willing to burn a bridge over this, one, I'm not burning a bridge, because a lot of the tweets that I'm talking about layoffs, I never mention specific companies for a reason, because I'm talking about the general topic of layoffs. I think I've only called out Bungie maybe 3 times, and it was all very honest and truthful. And you can know that because if I wasn't, I would have gotten my severance package rescinded, and I would have gotten a cease and desist. Everything I've said is truthful. I am not, and that's not even the tip of the iceberg, but that's also not the point. Bungie's not the only studio that did layoffs when they weren't necessary and made money off of it. It is not an uncommon practice, but it is a practice that it is time to stop. Now that we have seen how truly insidious it can get, which is all of 2023 and into 2024, we started off this year not going a single day without layoffs. It's time to start calling out when layoffs are not being used in the way that they are designed to be used, and instead being weaponized to cull people trying to make cultures more safe, people trying to advocate for accessibility, worker protections, work-life balance, healthier studio cultures. You know, you've seen a lot of stories through the years of many studios where sexual misconduct was a very common denominator. And this cannot happen because we've seen so many signs leading up to these before the big exposés that now we should be better about being able to identify it. So that's why I'm really talking about this. So CEO Lars, he is the head, therefore he is taking on the grand protector role, which is the whole point of that spinoff. Tangent. Thank you for coming to my head talk.
Thanks. I'm glad you came along, partner.
As the head, you are getting paid that money because you are now the CEO, meaning every single person underneath you is under your protection. As somebody that was in the military, I have a very big protective instinct. I have left jobs when I realized I was the problem. I had put my career in line for many colleagues that were scared to go talk to HR or scared to talk to whoever they needed to, and they've asked me to go in with them. I've had to say, fire me then, before in my career. And do you know how terrifying that is? When you love what you do, but you know that they won't take whatever's going on seriously until they have to look you in the eyes. But it's terrifying. But it's worth it, because we are slowly making the next generation of gaming a healthier place. But we can't if we let them beat us into submission, which is a part of what these mass layoffs are, is a demoralizing, and they know it, and they're weaponizing it so that you have to grieve, and then they can come in looking like the hero. And you can see it. There's a pattern. If you just pay attention, you can see it. Just look at news headlines. There is a picture being painted. So in a recent statement to Game Industry Biz, good old Lars said that he, as a leader and an owner, sometimes you need to take the blame and need to be humble about it if you've made mistakes and how you should have done differently. Correct. This is a correct thing to say. I wish I could trust it. And he doesn't need me to trust it, to be honest. Who the fuck am I? Let's be real. This is just thoughts. This is just my thoughts. I need to get the thoughts out, and I want to keep the conversation relevant to what it should be relevant to, and I don't want this to get buried for many reasons.
All right, then, keep your secret.
I'm sure I deserve a lot of criticisms. You do. There's no I'm sure. There's no little wiggle room. You do. You deserve all of the criticism you're getting. I couldn't find it, so if anybody can find it, please let me know. They might have deleted it, but there was a picture of them literally on a beach after I think the layoffs hit like 900 numbers, where they're like, we're processing this difficult time. Processing what? You're rich. You can just afford to go out with the whole team to wherever you are to process something that you did. Well, the people that you hurt don't know if they're gonna have a place to live next month. Every month we didn't have hot water. Every month has been a struggle for us since my layoff, and I can't ask for money. I can't bring myself to do that. I wish I could. Hats off to people that have the courage to ask for help. I have gotten the ability to ask for help beaten out of me at a very young age, so I can't. I wish I could, but I can't, and this is not me asking for money. Please do not give me any money. It's a very weird and stark juxtaposition to see that post and the tone deafness of it, and the reality of now 1,400 devs that trusted them or had no choice but to trust them. There's not a choice there. You don't get a say on if you get acquired or not. He says, I'm sure, but that he deserves a lot of the criticism. Again, he does, but to focus it on him and not his teams. While I do understand that, you are not the sole decision maker. You have an entire group of people around you that not all, there are some really good CEOs out there. I've met them, I've worked with them, and I admire them a lot. But there are a lot of CEOs that like to surround themselves with yes men because their egos are so fragile, they can't handle anything but that. Am I saying that's the case with Lars? No, absolutely not. I don't know the man, so I'm not going to put that character type on him because that would be incredibly unfair. I am purely judging the business decisions that this businessman has made in a business that he irreparably hurt. It's not just you, it is your teams. And also, what about the teams that are all laid off because of those poor decisions? I think he does deserve to take the blame for that. I think everyone in that room that agreed and made money off of those poor decisions while others are still unemployed to this day deserve to take the blame for that and deserve for it not to ever be forgotten. Don't attack them as people. You don't know them. We got to stop attacking. People do it to me all the time, but I've seen people do it to each other. That's why I don't weigh in too, even with the people that everybody is so sure are evil, because you don't know who they really are. And I think to me, the worst thing you could do to somebody is attack their character when you don't even care to get to know them, because your character is all you have. Your word is all you have. But that's just me. I have been told I have very bad opinions, so
not overrated.
Take that with a grain of salt. With these teams that are impacted and negatively affected by these poor decisions, what are these studios that are affected? What does that look like? Glad you asked.
Welcome to Thunderdome, bitch.
Their contribution to the layoffs alone resulted in 1,400 that we know of layoffs. This does not include, this number is also any number you get on layoffs, like we say 20,000, but it's much higher than that because that number never includes the people that were quiet fired. There were a lot of people in every single studio that did AAA studio that did layoffs this last year. There were a lot of people that were laid off much sooner than that as quiet firings for no fucking reason. And there was an investigation into wrongful termination. Unfortunately, a lot of states are at will, so it gets a lot of loopholes that, you guessed it, gets weaponized. Anyways,
back to the point.
1,400 employees that we know of. That also includes 7 shutdown studios. That also includes up to 29 canceled games. Could be more. I could be off on those numbers. It's been a little bit. And an insurmountable damage to the gaming industry as a whole. Because, and are you ready for my reasonings? And I'm if you're seeing me looking off camera, I'm looking at my notes because I ramble so much, which I've already done by this point, but I feel like it's gotten a lot better. But I am looking at notes, so I'm just going to call myself out here because, I don't know, I feel like it's really obvious I'm looking somewhere else. But anyways, so what do I mean by Embracer as the scapegoat and how that directly contributes? Well, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but without going into details, I'm not calling out anything. There are union efforts that are addressing these issues for the appropriate studios. There are also just investigations going on, but I'm not going to be calling out any studio, and I am not painting a picture for any studio or giving any hidden messages or anything like that, because I know Reddit loves hidden secrets, and I'm pretty good about being upfront when I'm doing that. Like I'll do that little but I'm not doing that here. I can say it will be very easy for you to paint that picture yourself, should you care, and you might not, and that's totally valid. Whatever you got to do to protect your peace. So, without calling anybody out, how is this layoff making it easier for mass weaponization? Without calling them out, again, saying this for legal reasons,
No one is above the law.
I will just point out that there are numerous studios that have publicly been under heat for how they treat their employees, up to including lawsuits, that have done preventative layoffs this year, that have gone on record internally to admit that those layoffs weren't actually necessary. But with every month seemingly featuring a new story about Embracer, it became easier for them to speedline efforts versus the slow drip of quiet firings to let what would otherwise be a massive PR scandal that could result in closure. And there's a couple of studios in this last year, in the later half of the year, that absolutely this applies to. Okay, that one was subtle, but that also applies to like 6 different studios. So still general. It became easier for them to sweep it away because surely there was a more horrific news story on the horizon. And with every story that came out about Embracer, that older frustration and anger flared up every time, making it a much bigger conversation and a much more inflamed conversation because it was so ripe. The studios that include the actual impact for closures was Volition, which makes me incredibly sad, Campfire Cabal, and Free Radical. And then layoffs, Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, New World Interactive, Lost Boys Interactive, Gearbox Publishing, Beamdog, Zen Studios, Digic, and Cryptic Studios. I feel like I'm missing 2, but I could be wrong. So if I'm missing any, I apologize. Please call me out respectfully in the comments, and I will make any note adjustments needed in the description because I want to be very accurate on this. That's very important. So why was when people are talking about this conversation, because it's happened so long ago now in terms of news cycles, what led to the restructuring? What was the bad decision that led to this mass impact? Oh, really quick, before I move on.
What is wrong with you?
I do want to say too, another part of how this layoff impacts the larger industry as a goal is we're seeing teams that are already famous for having to crunch now crunch even more. And them being told that, well, we just did layoffs. Of course, we can't do any type of raises or anything, because there are a lot of studios, including Bungie, that made it impossible to get any type of growth. I was told the only way I could go into the next position was if somebody stepped down. And then when somebody stepped down, they contracted out that senior position to a contractor without ever letting us even interview for it. And that is a very common practice. That's not a Bungie thing. That is a very common practice. And they're also hiring for senior roles early in career folks that don't have the necessary tools and skills to operate right out of the gate. Now, if they had proper guidance and stuff, absolutely. But how often is that actually the case? Not very often, and less likely by the year. And they're getting paid so much less than they should be. It is a way to cull out expenses from anything else but themselves. Okay, moving on. So why the restructuring that led to layoffs? A failed $2 billion investment deal with Saudi publishing and esports company Savvy Games Group. This included a trail of acquisitions and newsworthy biz moves, a strategy that leadership could be seen on LinkedIn and social celebrating, while the people that were under them that are used to being affected negatively by these types of moves were quietly and slowly coming to the realization of like, oh, now there's a timer on my career, and living with that fear.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Which I know sounds silly, but when you operate under that, like, unless you work in games, you don't know how stressful it is. I would rather go back to a war zone when I was military. Actually, I don't, because I love games, but it is very stressful. But I've been under more stress sometimes working in a game studio than I ever was when I was in an active war zone. Just let that sink in. Not a one-for-one comparison too, which I know somebody in the comments is going to make that conjecture, but obviously not a one-one. But I'm just saying, unless you've worked on it, you don't know. So having that pressure on top of that is very hard, especially when you're working in a creative field. And I've talked about this many times on this channel of you cannot expect a creative to create under crushing burnout and pressure. As layoffs continued, people that have been safe from layoffs, which it is just as hard for the people that are safe as it is for people that get impacted. Trust me, different struggles, but trust me, I've been on both sides. In fact, technically I've been laid off 4 times since I've been laid off, but I don't really count it because I never actually onboarded, but it was insane. Or no, 3 times, sorry. As layoffs continued, so they were coming into work every day. Devs are now having to come into work every day, kind of going back to that pressure, seeing every single day more news about layoffs. It's still expected to now perform at higher than normal levels because they now have to compensate for missing team members while trying to grieve lost teammates and also grieving that sense of stability that is often purposely curated by leadership. I've been leadership, I know. 9 times out of 10, that curation is not falsely. Like, people do genuinely want people to love where they work. However, that also allows for fertile ground for bad actors, which is absolutely the case. And we've seen this a lot, especially in the AAA space. They are using this curation of, look at what a good place this is. And I've had people tell me, and I've seen people get told this many times, that you'll never work again if you leave us. It's like a cult sometimes. It's very weird. But they'll do that like cultivation to as a primary retention effort, you know, and like instead of positive retention efforts like a competitive salary, and not thinking people are too stupid to realize when they're being ripped off, and paths of actual growth in their career.
I don't understand, bitch. Don't understand.
Basically, I equate that false sense of security cultivation, the basic final boss pizza party, the pizza party final boss.
Remember, boys, give me 3 days and 3 nights of hard fighting, and you will be relieved.
That's what that equates to in my noggin. We don't know what this means with their separation in terms of how that is going to have to trickle out, how that is going to promote healthier work patterns. I will say Lars and his buddies, they are going to have to make sure that everything is tight.
Nice.
And while they're doing that, I hope that they consider establishing healthier pipelines and maybe realize what human damage you've done to these people that have been forced to trust you, and making sure that doesn't happen again. Because there are unionized studios that were able to negotiate their layoffs and get a good severance and heads up. In other countries, you have to have a heads up, and even detailed. I remember when I worked in France, they would have to give you a detailed letter why they were letting you go. Like, it wasn't just like, cause we felt like it, which is absolutely America. America is a brat, man. We're a brat in every way, shape, or form. And it's really sad because there's such a human cost. There are people, we've lost some really good people in the gaming industry that have left the industry entirely. There are a lot of people that are mentally not doing really well. I will be very honest with you. I have been on phone calls with the crisis line more often than I'd like to admit. As a suicide survivor, I have to be very cognizant of how I feel and address it immediately versus letting myself sink into it. And I am not the only one. And also not everybody has that like resource thinking, because they haven't worked as a crisis counselor themselves, to realize like I'm getting to that low point where I need to reach out. I need to do something. And it's scary. And I just gaming is amazing. And creating video games, the more I learn about what it takes to create a video game, the more I'm convinced they shouldn't even exist, because they're just magical. It's magic! And the thought process behind it and everything is just incredible, and it's beautiful and it's stunning and
talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before.
And I want it to be good. And I've talked about this in a previous video, the one that came after the kindness one of, you know, if you don't like it, then don't play it. Build your own studio. You should be inspired. Instead of being so focused on being angry, be inspired. Don't be wounded, be wise. Go create your own studio. Create the visions you want to see then. You don't have to cancel somebody else's vision out so your vision can get it. You know, there's enough seats at the table. And we can't make a healthier work environment and a healthier industry for consumers and developers alike for the next generation if we're not honest about what's actually going on and aren't courageous enough to stand the fuck up. That's all. It's not a hate campaign. It's not a fuck you. It's a fuck you because you deserve it. It's a fuck you, do better. Enough is enough. As gamers, if you're a gamer watching this and you don't work in the industry, I'm begging you, be quiet and listen. Don't argue with devs. Devs see a lot more happening behind the scenes than you ever will unless you work in it. If they're telling you something and you're not understanding something, then ask to clarify. Don't combat. We're tired. We need your help more than ever. I genuinely believe the path forward is if the consumer and the developer has this symbiosis, because that line between the two different groups is thinner than ever with social media and Discord. So let's use that in a positive way. Let's alchemize that in a positive way, right? Okay, I'm going into ranty territory, so I'm ending this video now before it's 45 minutes. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this information was helpful. I hope it inspires anybody that is working in games to just, it's okay. We're working on it. It's getting better. We just have to be patient. I hope that you are prioritizing that self-care and you are drinking that water. I am a thirsty bitch right now. As soon as I get off this video, I am chug, 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 chug. And I hope you're always leading with your kindest foot forward, especially when it's hard to do that. That's when it's needed the most. Be the person that you want to see more of. Be the person that your dog would be proud of. Just be a light. It's a choice, and it's a choice you have to make every day, but you can choose it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye.